a confession to make. I'm a perfectionist. Correction. I'm a perfectionist in recovery. Like right now, standing here before you, everything in my mind needs to be perfect. My diction, being sure that I don't have any ums or ahs or so's unnecessarily. What I'm wearing, my makeup. I think you get the picture. I could go on. Well, you know, as a matter of fact, I will go on. I have this relationship with mirrors. I cannot walk by a mirror without looking at myself. And I used to think it was vanity. But it's not vanity, it's perfectionism. Because I would look in the mirror to be sure that every little thing was perfect. And my hair. My hair has to be perfect. I was raised by hairstylists. And as a little girl, they chased after me all the time with a comb and a brush to be sure that I was the perfect advertisement for Agnello's Beauty Salon. That was my maiden name. So I have a fun story to tell you. When I was in San Diego for my speech retreat, the last day we were there, we were gathering for an event, and everyone was in this private suite in the hotel. And my coach came over to me and he said, "Patricia, I would like to mess up your hair." And I looked at him and I said, knowing that it would be good for me if he messed my hair up, he just went wild. He just put his fingers in my hair and it was like all over the place. And everybody laughed and they even took a picture. But I don't think they've put it on Facebook yet. And then, of course, how many of you can relate to this? You get out of the shower and you look in the mirror, right? Oh, God, what about this and this and this and this? And we're so critical of our bodies. How many of you can relate? Yeah, quite a few. Yeah. So my theory is this, that behind the mask of the perfectionist is a person that doesn't feel very secure in themselves. They don't feel good enough, so they have to wear this mask that everything is perfect. They feel unworthy, undeserving, and certainly not loving themselves. Really, being a perfectionist is a subtle form of self-abuse, I have found. So, as I said, I'm a perfectionist in recovery. Even here today, videotaping this speech, I'm deciding on these outfits, going back and forth and driving the poor guys crazy that are here videotaping me. So, I want to tell you a story. But first, I want to give you a little background. So for the last 14 years, I've been doing television shows on cable. The show's called Get Conscious Now. And before that, I did another show called The Paradigm Shift. And the show is about science and spirituality, showing the connection between science and spirituality. And I think there's a very powerful connection there, especially with the coming of quantum physics very recently in our society. So I interviewed wonderful scientists, people like Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, about how our beliefs really inform the cells of our body. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, who says there's cause and effect and there's causing effect. He's a neuroscientist, fabulous guy. So I've interviewed some wonderful people over the years. But in March of 2014, I hit the jackpot because I interviewed none other than Dr. Deepak Chopra. Now, I've always loved Deepak. He's one of my favorite mentors, spiritual mentors. And I'm sure many of you have heard of him. How many of you have heard of him? Yeah, most everyone in the room has heard of him. You know, he's written, I think, close to 100 books now. And he's conducted all kinds of incredible seminars all over the world. He's renowned in the consciousness conversation. So through a new friend in my life, and it was in actually 2013 that I met this fellow. He happened to be a very dear, close friend of Deepak, and this new friend, became a close friend of mine. And he said, you know, Deepak's going to be coming to town to do me a favor, to make a presentation at the Victoria Street Theater, and I thought perhaps you might be interested in interviewing him. Well, I was so thrilled and so excited that I would be interviewing Dr. Deepak Chopra. So he confirmed it with Deepak's agents, and Deepak was coming on the show in March of 2014. I had several months to prepare. When I tell you that I was prepared for this is a gross understatement. I was super prepared. I went through all of my books. I went through all of my recordings and I listened to them. I drafted questions that were brilliant. And we were going to be talking about aging and consciousness, which I think is a conversation that we can all relate to. And you know, the first time that I heard Deepak speak was in the mid-'80s, and it was in Boston in a packed ballroom. And I hadn't really ever heard him before, but I'd heard of him. So I went to hear him, and I heard him say something that had such a tremendous impact on me in my life that it became the philosophy that I live by, and also the focus of my work as a counselor and a teacher and a speaker. This is what he said: "We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Wow. I got it. I just knew he was right. And I always thought he coined that phrase, but actually it came from a Dominican priest by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin in the late 1920s. He said, "We are not merely human beings having an occasional spiritual thought. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." So this phrase kept coming up in my personal growth over the years, and I really credit Deepak for it. So, as I said, I was super prepared for this show. Not only did I prepare myself academically, but I was sure I had plenty of crew. I lined up my makeup artist months in advance because she was hard to get. I had a professional photographer there to take for the photo ops. And of course, I had a standing room only audience in the studio that day. So I was very, very excited. However, I was also fearful. I was fearful that I would mess it up somehow, if something would happen. And I thought it was going to be the interview of a lifetime that would open the doors for me for my television show. He would open the doors for me for my television show. But here's what happened that day. My makeup artist was 45 minutes late, and Deepak was 15 minutes early. And instead of doing my makeup myself or having the photographer do my makeup, and she could have done that, I insisted on waiting for the makeup artist, not realizing that Deepak was going to be early. So he arrived, and I'm in the makeup room, and you know what? I kept Deepak Chopra waiting for 20 minutes on the set. He was not happy. This was exacerbated by the fact that my friend never told him it was an hour interview. My friend never told him that. He just assumed it was going to be like other interviews he did on radio and television, be like a 10, 15-minute process, and he'd be in and out of there in an hour. And he had a big event that night at the theater in town, so he wanted to have time to rest and take a break before his event. But here he is sitting on my set. Oh, the other thing I did is I had a new logo and a new set designed just for him. So by the time I got to the set, he was not happy. this was like a bad dream. Now, I want to tell you something really freaky. 10 years before this day, 10 years, I had this dream about Deepak Chopra coming on my show. And in the dream, I was driving to the studio to do the show with Deepak, and I was on this loop, and I could not get off the loop. I was driving around and around and around, and I couldn't find the exit off to the studio. However, finally I did. But guess what? I was very late for Deepak, and he was not happy. And he didn't say a word to me, but I saw the expression on his face. And I'll tell you, it was the same expression on his face when I walked to the set and sat down beside him. Now, I had a co-host that day, and as I asked the questions of Deepak, he never made eye contact with me. Every time he asked a question, he would look at my co-host, Stu. I felt a little bit slighted with that, but you know, I got over it. As it turned out, because of the incredible editing skills of my very compassionate editor, the final product, the show, turned out to be quite well. In fact, you could even watch it if you want. Just go to youtube.com, Get Conscious Now, which is my YouTube channel, and go to March 2014, and you'll see the Deepak Chopra show. It was brilliant information, and I loved the conversation. But I felt like I had really blown this opportunity. And it was so interesting that I had this dream 10 years before. So the aftermath was a final good show, and I tortured myself for the next, not week, not 2 weeks, not 6 weeks, not 1 month, 3 months. For 3 months, I beat myself up. It was awful. Finally, I decided I have to do something to shift this. So I sat down and I wrote him a letter. And I wrote him a letter about how I was this perfectionist and how I waited for my makeup artist and how I'm so sorry I kept him waiting. And all the different personal growth lessons I learned as a result of him coming on the show. Well, you know, it felt better. It was rather cathartic to be able to get it out. I never heard back from him or from his secretary or agent or anyone. But just this last year, several years later after he came on, just this last year, 2018, I bumped into him in Santa Barbara after he did a presentation at one of the theaters there. And after I told him who I was, we both had a really good laugh about it. So I felt much better. I'm hoping he'll still open some doors for me. So, what is the message here? The message is perfectionism, which is really overcompensation for negative belief systems that I carried from my childhood as a result of an event that happened to me as a young girl. I was molested. Feelings of unworthiness, undeservedness, not good enough, never be successful, lack of self-love. That was the mask. That was the mask behind the mask, so to speak. So what do I do when I'm feeling stuck in my perfectionism? I remind myself that the human experience is not meant to be perfect. That what I considered at the time was a failure was not a failure. It was an opportunity for me to grow as a result of what I learned, and that's what I shared in the letter to Deepak. So, the human experience is not meant to be perfect. I remind myself about that. It's one of the things that I do. The other thing I do is I get in touch with my passion to make a difference in the world, my passion to inspire people to wake up to this conversation of who we truly are. Spiritual beings having a human experience and with an innate and measurable power to create our reality. That was the other piece that was so important. So we're creating our reality all the time. So as I allowed these negative thoughts and fearful feelings to come to the fore, that's what I was creating. So when I get in line with my true passion, you know what happens? I forget what I look like. I'm not worried about how perfect my makeup is, how perfect my hair is, how perfect anything is, because I'm so excited to be sharing from my heart what I know to be true. We're all energy beings. Everything's energy. Did you know that? Einstein says, everything is energy, that's all there is to it. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. So, we are creators of our reality. And when I remember that, I can stop and say, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of perfectionism. I'm going to choose another way. Also, I was very attached to the success of this show. That's another part of the perfectionism thing. I was very attached to it being perfect and the interview of a lifetime, and oh my God, I was interviewing Deepak Chopra. And you know what I've discovered? Attachment, when we're attached to something we really want, guess what's behind that attachment? Fear that we're not going to get it. And that's what drives it. And guess what? We set ourselves up for disappointment, and that's exactly what I did. And I'm sure you can relate to this. How many of you can relate to this? Yeah. So negative thinking sets us up for disappointment. And I want to share something with you. What I have discovered is that a term I use called engaged detachment. Engaged detachment. And I really try to practice that coming here to the studio to record this, is that I'm engaged in it and I want it to be great and I want it to happen, but I'm detached. That whatever happens is going to be perfect. So I want to leave you with this. This is what I remind myself of all the time, that I am perfect in my imperfections. So the next time you get caught up in your perfectionism, think about that. I'm perfect in my imperfections. So thank you very much.